Hello, everybody. I'm Mel Hauser. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the executive director of All Brains Belong. Welcome to Brain Club. Let's share screen to get us oriented to our conversation. So tonight we're going to do a book chat on the book About Us, Essays from the Disability Series of the New York Times, edited by Peter Catapano and Rosemarie Garland Thompson. Before we begin, closed captions are enabled. You just have to toggle them on at your end if you'd like to use them. Depending on your version of Zoom, you might see the live transcript closed captioning icon. If not, look for the more ... and choose show subtitles. You can also do the same and choose hide subtitles if you want to turn them off. If you're new to Brain Club or new to All Brains Belong in general, we're a nonprofit that is, we've set forth to improve the health and belonging of people with all types of brains, and we do that through medical care, social connection, employment support, and community education. And that's how Brain Club fits into the whole constellation of the programs that we have here, and you are invited to be part of the ABB community. Brain Club is our education program weekly for a purpose of demonstrating our approach to neuro-inclusive culture for purposes of shifting broader community awareness of the issues of concern and importance to the neurodivergent community so as to promote new ways of thinking and being in the world. And then the idea is that you go forth into the rest of your lives and carry it on. And that's how culture change happens. Everyone is welcome at Brain Club. Brain Club's for neurodivergent people and those who support neurodivergent people, people who are exploring their neuro identity, and really anyone with any type of brain who wants to learn about neuro-inclusive culture. What we do here, as I mentioned, we provide education and information about neurodiversity and model neuro-inclusive culture through community panels and guest speakers and book chats like tonight. It's a way of providing a way to better understand neurodivergent experiences and experiences of chronic illness and disability through presenter stories. And for many, this is a way to feel less alone. It's also a place where often we are criticizing systems that make it difficult for people to get their needs met, and we are bright spotting alternatives. What we don't do, we don't give medical advice or provide therapy here. It's not the right place to process individual experiences or provide individual emotional support or individualized needs. It's also not a place where we criticize individuals or social groups. There are multiple right ways to participate. You can have your video on or off. Even if it's on, no one expects anything of you. Feel free to move around or fidget or stim or eat or take breaks or anything else that needs doing. You can communicate however you're most comfortable, including not at all. Observation is a valid form of participation. And in addition to affirming all aspects of identity, this is a group program where we think about the group and the needs of the collective. And if we do have time for discussion later, what we do during discussion is we moderate it to protect the space for all kinds of brains. So we invite you to listen, to learn, to observe what a neuro-inclusive space can look like, and maybe pick up some new words and concepts. Lizzie's going to put a link in the chat to the Brain Club Digital Resource Library where you can access some additional information, and you're certainly welcome to ask in the chat if you have questions about anything that you hear. Think about what you hear or connects to the rest of your life. Speaking of the chat, you're welcome to use the chat throughout tonight's program. We just ask that if you're going to use the chat, we ask that you type in the big box only and try to avoid doing reply threads, because what happens is that makes the chat bounce up and down, and then I can't read it and I can't respond. So if you could just use the big box, that would be a huge help. Thank you. If it's your first time at Brain Club, welcome. Keep coming back. It might take several times to figure it out. Glad you're here. Lizzie's going to put some logistics questions in the frequently asked questions in the chat. All right, before we begin, big thank you to North Country Federal Credit Union for sponsoring today's Brain Club. As well as thank you to all of you for your support, not just tonight, but throughout the whole year to make it possible for us to be able to bring this program to the community week after week. Thank you. And so without further ado, let's get into our book chat on About Us. First, a bit of background information. Disability. More than 1 in 5 people living in the United States has a disability, making it, in fact, the largest minority group in the country. 1 in 3 households include someone with a disability. And so not only are we talking about numbers here, large numbers of people impacted by disability, but just like having an accessible world is a collective responsibility. In fact, accessibility, offering things in multiple different ways using universal design principles, actually makes spaces and systems work better for everyone. So, often the medical model of disability focuses on impairments, the things that are wrong. um, what we talk about here at Brain Club often is the social model of disability, where rather than a collection of deficits of that of the individual, really the amount of disability that someone experiences is relative to the barriers in the world. So the social model of disability looks at barriers to access. So, for example, if I had a visible disability, let's say I had a mobility related disability and I used a wheelchair, if I approached a building that had a ramp, I'm going to have less disability than if I approach a building that does not have a ramp. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to see you, Tanya. Lizzie, can you put the links in the chat to the book and the audiobook? I know you had them. You were probably getting to it when we started, when we got to the book itself. But Lizzie will drop those in a few minutes. I think maybe now. Okay, so we're up to that slide. This book came from a series of essays that the New York Times ran from 2016 to I think the end of 2018, about 2.5 years. And so this book About Us, edited by Peter Catapano and Rosemary Garland Thompson. What this book is it's a collection of personal essays that explore disability as a vital part of human experience. All of the essays are written by disabled authors who share their perspectives and, about a whole number of things around identity and culture and access and a whole range of themes that we'll point out to you in the next slide. It's really about reframing disability as difference, not a list of impairments or deficits. Certainly, things can be hard, but the amount of how hard something is relative to the barriers in the environment. Sierra, would you be able to take over letting people in? Thank you. Awesome. The point of the series has been to invite readers to see disability as an essential lens for understanding society and an inclusive society. So we're going to start off with a word from the editors. We're going to watch a little clip of an interview with one of the editors, Rosemary Garland Thompson, talking about the book. Except I never click the button to share sound, ever. Okay.
I was born in the United States in the mid-20th century. I was born as a person with a disability. Of course, we didn't talk about it then in that way. I was born different. I was born deformed, as it were. But I was born into a family that was loving, and I went about life as anyone would go about life, without any kind of consciousness about disability politics, disability inclusion, without any understanding of what we now think about as civil and human rights. And so I grew up making my way in the world, not necessarily as a disabled person, but as a person. And it wasn't until I was a full-on adult that I learned about the concept of civil rights, of women's rights, of the rights of people with disabilities. It wasn't until I had discovered the disability rights movement, or even the concept of disability rights, that I began to think of myself as a disabled person, or to think of myself as politically and socially involved in the movement for building disability rights and disability culture and disability inclusion, the kind of politics that I practice now and that is practiced in general by academics who are involved in progressive liberal agendas in our academic research and
Just for some context, I want to read you some excerpts from the book. Except I queued up the wrong page. All right, I'll read this part at least. Many of us have invested in this identity as persons with disabilities, and detailed the benefits, even the pleasures of living with disabilities as people with disabilities. We don't spend time wishing to be someone else, but instead put our energies into flourishing as we are. Some of us relish the challenges of such a life, others are demoralized. For some of us, disabilities are neutral variation. For others, it is a cultural membership. For still others, a pathology. Another author, Andrew Solomon, writes in the foreword, "We are mostly an accumulation of strengths and weaknesses, of pathologies and non-pathology conditions and identities. So this book, though it is about disability, is really in many ways about how we seek meaning in who we are rather than who we might have wished to be." Rosemary Garland Thompson writes, "Claiming an identity can be an active self-knowledge and a generosity to our um, interlocutor, letting them know how we understand ourselves and who we think we are. By telling our own stories, we rewrite the old script of disability that so many of us have had to live by because we haven't had any others." So the themes of this book are vast. So these essays are organized according to a cluster of themes around justice, belonging, working, connecting, loving, and family. So I think that, as we thought about this book on our staff, we thought about, like, why might someone benefit from reading or listening to this book? So first off, to learn about different disabled people's lived experiences. And so if you are a person with a disability, maybe there might be stories that are in common with yours and maybe different from yours. And if you're not a person with a disability, the idea of being able to hear directly from disabled writers instead of others who might speak about disability, and so that we can all see the diversity within disability. There's not like a single story or a single truth. And so we can really expand how we think about access, belonging, and full and meaningful participation, and reflect on our own roles in building a world where people with all kinds of bodies and minds can thrive. I'm going to play a video, a clip from one of the authors, Letitia Andre Doucette, and then I'll read an excerpt from Letitia's essay.
And really, my lane has always been the intersection of a Black woman, a non binary woman, a queer woman, and a disabled woman, right? And that often what I see is that those stories and that perspective is missing. And so, of course, as a bet, I was actually recovering from back surgery, in a extensive back surgery that I nearly died from. I had had sepsis, pulmonary embolism, And I was recovering in bed when I wrote that. And I said, like, if I don't make it, let this be my last testament to the world. Like, this is what Lutisha has to say about these topics. Mainly because that intersection of racism and ableism, I have nearly died as a result of that. You know, I'm a survivor, clearly, as a result of that. And so it is important for people to understand what that experience is like and how to navigate in these spaces because, you know, I am named after my maternal grandmother who, you know, registered blacks to vote in Jim Crow South, right? That was an extreme kind of testament to her own will and power. And so I continue that legacy in the work that I do. So that
Hey, I'm going to read an excerpt from the essay, If You're in a Wheelchair, Segregation Lives. As a Black woman with incomplete quadriplegia and chronic pain, and as a full-time manual wheelchair user, my own ability to move freely is frequently restricted. Too often, both the lack of accessibility in public spaces and the ingrained ableism of many non-disabled people bar my way. Let's say I want to go out to dinner downtown. Even if I can enter an establishment, which I often can't, very rarely is the accessible seating in a visible place, if it is there at all. Once inside, I am often relegated to a corner, the aisle, a back room. In brew pubs with high tables and high chairs, trying to have a conversation at eye level with other people's crotches while nursing my beer leads me to feel less like an adult and more like Oliver Twist. No one wants to try the new hot spot in town and then be seated at the kids' table. Some aspects of this situation are too painful. Much of what people with disabilities like mine must suffer conjures the historically painful specter of racial segregation. Even at my job, where I work for the city as a researcher in a government building, there's an entrance with a double doorway for those walking in, and then next to it, hidden around a pillar, a sliding door for wheelchair users. The other exterior doors have stairs leading up them. Our freedom of movement is hindered in other ways. How we move as disabled people often leads to poor encounters with the police. We're often taken for drunks, our caregivers are harmed or even shot. We are perceived as threats and beaten when trying to communicate, or worse. And to make things worse, the intersection of race, poverty, and disability is often ignored. Yeah, I agree, Elizabeth. The title says so much. The author Elena Leary, in the essay The Importance of Finding Family, writes, disability is the only marginalized identity that anyone can enter anytime. 1 in 20 Americans is disabled, but we're often so disenfranchised that our rights are an afterthought. Let's see if there's anything else on that page. The great irony is that as a dyslexic person, the font of the page numbers is something my brain is struggling to perceive. Okay, I think we'll go. All right. So Peter Catapano writes, the onset of disability can bring an abrupt dissonance between who we were yesterday and who we are today. So that is that disability is a group that people can both be born with as an aspect of identity that they grow into and can enter this group at any time in one's life. The author continues. I think there might be another slide. I'm going to read this anyway. We might end up seeing this again on a future slide, but I come to this movement for rights through my struggle with depression, a mental illness that can earn you disability stripes. Depression's upside is substantial. I've learned a lot from my depression. If I had my life to do over, however, I'd wish it away. I pray that it never afflicts my children. I also belong, as we all do, to myriad other minorities. If I imagine myself without dyslexia, without ADD, without depression, without gayness, without nearsightedness, without orthostatic hypotension, and goes on to list a number of other identities, there's very little of me left. We are mostly an accumulation of strengths and weaknesses, of pathologized and non-pathologized conditions and identities. So this book, though it is about disability, is really in many ways about how we seek meaning in who we are rather than who we wish to be. So many of these essays relate to different types of transitions and narratives around transition. Hold on, let me get there. In Elliot Kukla's essay, In My Chronic Illness, I Found a Deeper Meaning, they write, I discovered that I was no longer trusted by my doctors about my own body's experiences. I reported odd, terrible, and sudden physical changes. They recommended cognitive behavioral therapy and Weight Watchers. I felt exiled from the world of the well, isolated by thick walls of suspicion. I went from doctor to doctor looking for answers, but overnight I had gone from being a trusted rabbi and chaplain who works with seriously ill and dying people on hospital medical teams to a quote hysterical chronically ill person. Though I had seen it happen to my clients, I now understood firsthand that being disbelieved is nearly universal for people with chronic illnesses, especially those that are largely invisible or hard to diagnose, or both. I believed that as a healthcare professional equipped with skills to advocate the health and navigate the healthcare system, that I would be treated differently. I should learn how hubristic that was. Or I soon learned how hubristic that was. So then the essay goes on to describe the process of getting a diagnosis, and then continues. Like most of us, I had been raised to see illness as something temporary, a stopover on the way to recovery or to death, not a place to live. But weeks, months, and then years passed, and I did not get better. My doctors and even some friends and family members suggested that I could get better if only I tried harder, relaxed more deeply, thought more positively. I became a lightning rod for others' fears of disability, dependence, and fragility. In a political moment where healthcare is treated as a luxury and hurricane victims are blamed for their own disasters, an ethic of personal responsibility reigns. But sometimes sick people just stay sick. And there's no meditation, medication, positive outlook, exercise, or smoothie that can fix it. Eventually, I stopped hoping to be well, or even pretending that I lived in that future heavy land of hope anymore. I stopped trying to, quote, overcome my body and started living a present tense life in chronic illness. As the pace of my new life slowed, I could appreciate sensual pleasures in a new and heightened way. Sunlight outside my bedroom window, my dog's velvety fur, a cool breeze in my garden, richly colored flowers. On days when my brain was too fogged to do anything, I let myself float in and out of a rich, infinitely layered dream world. And with great difficulty, I learned how to accept care. A child of neglectful and absent parents, I had been fiercely independent for most of my life now. Now, as fatigue gripped my body, I needed help preparing food, showering, doing laundry, managing my medications. This demanded a difficult, profoundly spiritual vulnerability. I realized that if I were truly to see myself as equal to my seriously ill clients and not performing a kind of quote charity in my work, I had to come to terms with the necessity of interdependence. We are born needing care and die needing care, and I am no exception. At brief moments in the middle of life, we hold the illusion of independence, but we are always driving on roads we did not build, eating foods we did not pick or raise. Allowing the illusion of my own independence to drop away unmasked a fundamental truth of being human. Like many people, I had once measured my worth by my capacity to produce things and experiences, to be productive at work, share responsibilities at home, quote, show up equally in my friendships, and rack up achievements. Being sick has been a long, slow detox from capitalist culture and its mandate that we never rest. Slowly, I found a deeper value in relationship beyond reciprocity, an unconditional love and care based in justice, and a belief that all humans deserve relationship, regardless of whether we can offer anything measurable back. In those discoveries, I've been led by other sick and disabled people whose value had always been apparent to me. Amid the brilliant diversity of power wheelchairs, service dogs, canes, and ice packs, it's easy to see that we matter just as we are. As I age, my body and mind will surely become more disabled. I will lose cognitive and sensory capacities. My skin and muscles will sag and disintegrate. I will depend more and more on other people. I will not be able to control my bowels or my surroundings as tightly. I will lose teeth and hair and precious memories. This is not a tragedy. This is what it means to be human. Elena Leary, in the essay The Importance of Finding Family, writes, "It is critical for disabled people to find a sense of community. Our strength comes from the relationships with other disabled people that we create, whether they are online or in person, and the lifelong mentorship these relationships foster." Hold on. I feel like there's so many more bookmarks in this book. Where did they go? I guess we did them all. All right, so let me go back to my slides. So I'd love to hear either out loud or in the chat what's coming up for you. Oh, Tanya says in the
Thinking,
chat talking about disability and sexuality. There's a lot of great essays in that book about that very subject.
but then now sometimes people with disability, depending on their not only their level of capacity, but it's also depending on what intimacy and sexuality means for them.
Absolutely. And I think I think for all people, to have, I think this comes back to as early in life as possible to be exploring one's values and at like whatever the developmentally appropriate level is and safe relationships and, um, because I think safe relationships are, sometimes modeled for people and sometimes not. And so as one grows up, sometimes other topics like sexuality don't ever come up. And I think that's why it is so important that I know several of you in the audience, this is the work that you do in supporting people in exploring and understanding this really important topic.
But it's also something Roger just said about even not excited about consent.
Well, consent is a world rule, and consent is absolutely essential. And I think that these like topics of consent need to be introduced as early as possible to all people. Thanks, Tanya, for bringing that up.
Welcome.
Shay says, this was exceptionally deeply real, beautiful, and meaningful. Thank you. Thanks, Shay. Reagan says, I love being reminded of how interdependent we are in all experiences of life. Scrolling up, Elizabeth says, I think what able-bodied folks in my orbit miss is that I claim this identity as a way to be further seen. Yeah. I want those people to understand that I am having a different experience than they are. And those people don't want to grant that to me. They don't want to know that people can and do live differently because that challenges their assumptions. Yes. Yes. And I think that's why one of the slides had an excerpt around like about found family, about finding other disabled people to share one's experiences with, so that one is not open to the judgments of other people. I'm not available for your input as to whether or not I get to claim an aspect of my own identity. But it's hard to draw that line when you don't have a community of other people who get it, and that becomes your cultural norm. Sierra. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, thought I did that. First, I totally agree with what you just said. I've been really reflecting on one of the first quotes you read about a wheelchair user talking about how, or at least what I took from it was like how accessibility isn't just like, can I get into the building? It's also like, how much extra steps do I need to get in the building? How othering is it for me to be in this space? And I reflecting on seeing the big difference my sister, who's a wheelchair user, had in interacting with classmates in a wheelchair that was to the ground versus in a wheelchair that was able to stand and be at eye level with classmates. And not just that, like, she was more comfortable interacting, but people actually were willing to interact with her more because she was at their eye level. And, ideally, we don't have to conform to those norms. And ideally, people feel comfortable interacting with people at whatever eye level they are. But I think that that intersection kind of between being able to be accessible in a way of belonging versus just accessible of being able to show up at a space.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sierra. Anne. Oh, you're muted. Sorry. There you go.
I think, thanks. I think for me, it's just a reminder. I mean, I'm just new to this group. This is my second time, and I'm here a lot for my kid. And I guess it's just a good reminder of how my kid operates in the world daily. And just because, my, I don't, so sometimes it's hard for me to, to see the world through their eyes. And I think that just being here and hearing what I've heard this week and last week is just remarkable to me. And it's something I'm so glad I found, um, because that's what I want to do. I want to be there for my kid and try to understand what they experience so often, that I think in the past I just was definitely, more about, you know, um, I didn't understand. It was more the push through. You got this, and and I didn't understand till they were older. I mean, they're only 21, but what, that's not the advice that they need or the support that they need. So it just was great to hear all these words, because it just really, it spoke to me differently than I think of even a year ago. So thank you.
And I'm so glad you're here. And I think what is very common in the All Brains Belong community is adults who are learning about their own brains for the first time, and they don't have a parent or caregiver who is even open to the idea of discovering their brains. The idea that you're here, like I have chills, and I think that the experiences of detachment that happen when an adult starts to explore how they move through the world, and they think back on the invalidating, dismissive messages that they have gotten from even well-intentioned people. And the difference, there's like two paths of the algorithm. Like pathway one is that the people in their lives who have given them messages of like, suck it up, hide who you are. If the person has self-awareness and is open to learning and exploring, those breaks, those breaches in the relationship can be repaired and mended. If the person doesn't have self-awareness and isn't interested in learning about their loved one's experience and continues to invalidate and shame and gaslight and other them, like, nope, that relationship's not going to heal. And so the fact that you're here, we can tell what path that you are on. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Danielle says, those excerpts were so powerful to hear. I could really relate to many parts of it, especially how sickness is not just a brief stop made and then you move on, and how life absolutely pivots to adjust to my new access needs, and that at what cost, spoons, actual money, do I need to ask someone for help? Also addressing the topic that being chronically ill does not make someone a lesser member of society, but in a capitalistic grind-driven reality for too many people, they project their lens onto others and can't see all of the beautiful and meaningful ways we belong as equals to take up space. And that equal doesn't mean sameness for all. It means supportive access needs being met for all. Just letting that sink in. I have chills. Thank you, Danielle. Beautiful. Tanya, before I call on you, I just want to give other people a chance who haven't had a chance to share yet. I just want to give a couple of minutes for processing. For many people, it's this space, this silence that allows people to think and enter a conversation. A lot of times life is going so fast and it's hard for people to enter conversations because there isn't just space. Bye, Susan. See ya. Okay, go ahead, Tanya.
Disability in general, in my world, as my lived experience, even though I had to learn it in the last 20 years, but it's not only neurological, but because even with mental illness and stuff, with our chronic, sometimes the majority of our chronic pain comes from neurologically, but some of the doctors and specialists, they still don't get it.
Yes.
But then they
Yes.
still don't get how people with disabilities can have a sexual life as well. To have our to let our own steam off. in a way.
Well, yeah, and I think that when we think about the ableism, the discriminatory belief that it is better to be able, or that a group of people who is able to do any number of things is superior to other people. Like this, it's like any other discriminatory ism. This is really bad, and so many isms are baked into medical education, and so no wonder professionals have this embedded unconscious bias. And I think that explains what you're describing. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to read the quotes in the chat and then we'll wrap up and preview next week, next month. Elizabeth says, we're also in a moment where social media encourages us to put the good, quote, good parts of us forward. It is work to reject that for a more well-rounded life and a more authentic life. And to recognize that what people put forth in social media is like a glimpse of like a couple of moments of their life. Sierra says, I've been thinking a lot about this Miss Major quote in the last week. Feels apt here too. Why would someone want to assimilate into being something that was so hateful? Into this society that couldn't care less if we went extinct? The hurt and horror that people were going through. I'm not ready to go back and hide inside a closet just to get erased like that. Letting that sink in. Thank you, Sierra. So thank you, everyone, for being part of this really important conversation. Just to preview, next week starts a new month. And so for those of you who are new to Brain Club, every month we have a new theme. So November's theme is transformation, learning and unlearning together. And we have a very intentionally building, each Brain Club week will build on the other. And so we'll start with transforming identity, transforming workplaces, transforming communities, and transforming systems. And so Lizzie has put a link in the chat. If you have not yet signed up for November Brain Club, we invite you to do so. Oh, you're so welcome. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We hope to see you next week. Have a good week. Bye.